what are the top three biggest things that we need to focus on to live the healthiest life possible?
Yeah, I'll mention a hack first that is
Okay.
highly underrated. That hack is fasting. So water fasting. There are obviously different methods of fasting, but I think fasting is the fastest way to affect that cardiovascular system. So fasting, what it does is it helps clean up the cardiovascular system, right? For a diabetic, for example, if they have thick blood, if they have more viscous blood, if they have more blood sugar, fasting is going to help them improve their insulin response. It's going to help them basically get into a catabolic state where the body is starting to break down and heal and repair. And so in order for our body to heal the cardiovascular system, and ultimately our cells and our tissues and our functions, we actually want to get into a catabolic state of our digestive system, right? So instead of absorbing nutrients by eating constantly throughout the day, we want to give it a break. And with fasting, we can improve that, the fastest.
Yeah.
And so there's a clinic in Santa Rosa, California, and their medicine is water fast. It's called True North. It's run by a guy named Alan Goldhammer, and literally they help people restore all kinds of chronic conditions with just fasting. So I think that is probably the top number one tip that I have.
I love that. When you say fasting, though, are we talking like intermittent fasting, you skip breakfast? Or are we talking, I went 4 days without food? Or what do you mean by fast? Or is it all?
Yeah, so all types of fasts can be beneficial. I am specifically talking about longer fasts. And generally, if you're attempting a fast, I wouldn't do it by myself without medical supervision for more than 3 days.
Okay.
And so if you have like severe cardiovascular issues, I think a 3-day water fast would actually be beneficial in kind of cleaning up that cardiovascular system.
How would I know if I'm having cardiovascular issues? Like, is that just something the doctor tells me, or do I just feel off or wrong?
So they say that cardiovascular issues it's basically called the widowmaker. And that's because most people, it's hard to tell, right? Somebody who has high blood pressure or diabetes, they might spend, half of their lives, decades without actually having any signs or symptoms of their cardiovascular issue. And so it's very hard to tell if somebody has cardiovascular issues without actually getting tested, right? And so there are some indicators of cardiovascular issues, and those are conditions like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. Right. And so if somebody's eating a ton of sugar regularly and they're having some circulatory issues like cold hands and feet can be an early indicator of cardiovascular issues. Another one is basically, let me think. Another indicator is having, not being able to, like somebody who's hot,
Okay.
for example, and we'll get into the health profiles in a little bit. But generally, what can happen is it clogs up the cardiovascular system and makes them stuck. And so if somebody tends to run hot, it's not a guarantee, but it's almost
Sure.
a guarantee that their cardiovascular system is kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Somebody who has a lot of all over pains, for example, probably has been affected in their cardiovascular function.
Is that something somebody can go to their doctor and just say, hey, I'm concerned about this, I think there might be a problem? Or is that something they go to a person like you for, or both?
Yeah, generally, it's hard to know early on, right? If somebody is in their 30s, they're not very likely to have diabetes or
Sure.
some kind of diagnosed cardiovascular issue. And just by looking at the blood work itself, like if you're looking at your glucose number or, your blood pressure, it might not have shown yet. It might not have been advanced enough in order for somebody to tell, right? And so I think Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine can diagnose that much earlier on based on the symptomology.
Okay.
Yeah.
And fasting, I want to talk about one more thing on that one.
Sure.
Is this something you even someone who's healthy, like, I mean, quote unquote healthy, like me, like I've got back
Yeah.
issues, right? But like I have no signs of any issues. Should I still consider fasting for a few days at a time? It terrifies me because I like food a lot, but which maybe that's a good reason to do it. But
Yeah.
should I be fasting?
Yes, so I think almost everybody can benefit from fasting. Obviously, we don't, you're a pretty slim guy. And so I think the concern there would be, we don't want you to lose too much weight because that's also not healthy, right?
Yeah.
But generally, like for you to do something like intermittent fasting or just a one-time fast once a year, I think that's going to benefit you. I saw a video on YouTube about a guy who had back pain. He's a little bit larger, actually. I'll have to drop the link for you.
Yeah.
But he fasted. He did a water fast for a whole week, and his back pain improved.
Oh, interesting.
And that's simply by improving his cardiovascular system and the delivery of the healing nutrients, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know, like, so I do a lot of, not a lot, I do a little bit of intermittent fasting. Where really I'm just busy and I skip food until later in the day.
Yeah.
But I have noticed a very clear correlation. The less I eat, the better I feel, right? The more I eat, the worse I feel. And it's almost a perfect correlation. So if the only thing that I feel worse is just hungry, right? But everything else, my blood sugar levels, my mood, everything else feels better when I don't eat, which I think is funny.
Yes.
And I think we're probably tapping into the way that our bodies have existed for eternity, which is we're not eating 3 square meals a day with protein bars and lattes in between, which is what we do today. And so I think when I don't eat and I eat maybe once a day, those days I just feel a lot better because that's how our bodies are used to functioning.
Yes. Well, intermittent fasting is kind of trendy these days.
Yes.
Like it's amongst entrepreneurs and real estate investors and people who are, into personal growth.
Yep.
Intermittent fasting has become a very big topic. So I consider that chronic conditions are due to overfeeding.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's 6 things that people can overfeed on. The 3 obvious ones, the SOS, salt, oils, and sugar. All the addicting foods have those added because if you add sugar and salt and butter to anything, it'll taste great, right?
Yeah.
If you fry it, I'll eat a stick,
Yep.
right? One of my friends likes to say that. The 4th thing is flour products. So basically, a lot of the addicting foods also have a lot of flour, right? It increases the surface area of the grain, of the whole grain, and absorbs into your bloodstream so much faster and can increase your blood sugar and your insulin response, right? The next thing is animal protein. And so animal protein, we tend to consume more of that than people in the blue zones. In the blue zones, I think the recommendation is that you consume, the average is the consumption of about 2 card deck sized pieces of protein per month, not per week.
Oh, wow. Can you explain blue zones for those who don't know? That's a fascinating topic.
Yes. So there are 5 blue zones in the world. And what they have found is that in the blue zones, they have the most centenarians, people who live over the age of 100, right? And so they studied them in depth. And what they found is they all exhibit certain commonalities, right? And one of them is nutrition. So that's been studied pretty in depth. And so generally in the blue zones, people eat less processed foods. They eat more whole foods, and they also eat less animal protein. There are other things as well, such as, happiness and community and so on, and stress levels. But I think in terms of nutrition, what I think, and also adopt myself is the belief that by removing some of these overnutrition, we can actually heal our body and give our body a break from constantly absorbing and being in this anabolic state where we're absorbing, right? Because if we're absorbing, bandwidth goes to absorption, and less bandwidth will go to the catabolic state where we're actually breaking down, repairing, and removing toxins. Yeah. And so you're right, spot on with, hey, I feel better if I don't eat, right?